So we're having an interview with Malcholm Burns, and I'll get Malcolm to introduce himself.
Okay, so my name's Malcolm George Burns. I'm the son of William Henry Burns and Dorothy June Burns.
And what's your nation?
My nation is the Wiradjuri nation, with specific ties to the northwestern corner of the Munggar people in Tubbo-ga.
This video that we're doing is to go onto a website to provide information to people who are training to be doctors and lawyers and teachers, etc. So we're looking for examples of where miscommunication has occurred due to cultural difference, and I'm wondering if you'd like to share a few of those examples that you might have experienced.
I guess the biggest barrier for me and a lot of people in the community is the different understandings that we have. We're coming from a cultural background, whereas when we're dealing with people in official departments and that, they see everything in box form and in black and white. We see things a little bit different. I do, at least, anyway.
And have you got examples of where that's occurred?
I guess in the past, just a misunderstanding, having interviews with legal teams to activate adoption that I tried to adopt my stepson through the Aboriginal Medical Service, but because his father was Aboriginal, they wouldn't take it on, and when I went to the broader community, they couldn't understand why I would want to do that type of thing. But for me, it was culturally appropriate for me to adopt him into my bloodline descendancy.
And why is that important?
It's important to me to give him acknowledgement within himself and to empower him as an identity, give him a strong identity to identify as an Indigenous Australian person. So
are those family connections things that you find are important to you?
Yes, very much so. I still have strong ties with my stepson, regardless of I've separated from his mother. There's still a love and kinship there between the two of us. We have the father-son relationship. Could be better, but for circumstances which take a bit of time. But I feel that he in the system, he loses his identity. When he's with me, he attaches to it in a stronger way, giving it worthwhile.
So that identity for our kids is absolutely essential, isn't it?
Of course, yes. It's one of the reasons why a lot of our young people turn to crime, because they don't have a strong identity to identify with. They identify to the system, and on the ground level, the only thing that they can really identify with in the system is crime, I guess, and with the lack of housing, the lack of health services, and the lack of opportunity for young Aboriginal people to become employed.
Are there cultural issues or essentials that you see as being important or that are being eroded in our communities?
Yeah, very much so. I feel that a lot's been lost. That's why you see a lot of lost people just wandering about in the streets, in the community, not really doing anything with their lives, because they see the system as theirs and accept it, and are unable to adapt to it fully, totally, because they still have their Aboriginal identity, which they don't identify to as strong as they need to.
Have you got any examples of where there's been this miscommunication in any other areas of like health or housing or employment or anything like that you want to share?
I guess we're at a disadvantage in all those areas, in health, in housing, but having said that, the whole community don't actually have a good health service in the hospital that's here, and the services that are there for the community are a little bit harder for them to access than if they were of the wider community, because they're locked into their own communities and their own small groups.
So, how do you think we have Aboriginal workers in many of these fields? Do you think that they add value to our services?
They definitely do, but again, as they move into the systems, they tend to grow away from the groups, and the groups end up running themselves or going in a direction away from other groups that are in the area, in the Dubbo district, and the groups don't seem to come together. I realise that there's people there for the services. Their job is very difficult because they're dealing with different groups within one area, and it's hard to please everyone or to fulfil everyone's needs. But there is definitely a larger demand there for assistance than there is assistance.
I know that you're involved with the Wiradjuri Direct Descendants Corporation. Can you tell me why you're involved in that and what it is that you're hoping to achieve?
I recently become involved with the corporation. I've always been attached to it through my bloodline and interested in what happens and where it goes. But I've been in the building construction industry most of my life, and I just recently had an incident where I was unable to perform my duties, and I just realised that it was time to put something back into my local community as well as my descendant bloodline to hopefully better the future for all of us, for everyone.
So why is Wiradjuri being set up?
Wiradjuri was originally formed to bring the Aboriginal people together and give us a stronger identity, something to identify to, a place of forecast, so we could project ourselves into the system and the future, and identifying other groups of Aboriginal people coming into the area to give them identification in their own right, and make them stronger in their own way, through a strong identity.
Are there any other examples that you want to give of where miscommunication has occurred due to cultural difference?
Yes, there's quite a few, not just from an Aboriginal perspective to the system, but within the community. The groups don't necessarily agree on different things, and they don't acknowledge each other, which is one of the purposes of the corporation, to bring those people together and give them their own right to exist on our country, and the strength to identify strongly and acknowledge others as the Indigenous people of Australia.
So what are some of the examples that you might have of where miscommunication has occurred?
Okay, so there was an incident a few years ago where there was riots in the street, and these were between two different groups that come from two different areas.
Two Aboriginal groups?
Yeah, maybe more, but come from remote areas in different towns, and they've been resettled into the Dubbo area, and the conflict that was going on out in the remote areas came into this community and went on and snowballed, and had a greater effect because they were confined to a smaller area. These people were confined to a smaller area, and then everybody got involved, and it turned into what everyone's seen on the TV, the riots in West Dubbo. And that was just a direct result of mismanagement of resettlement and not people not acknowledging each other.
Yeah, because there's really not that acknowledgement that there are differences amongst Aboriginal nations and clan groups. That's still that image, that stereotype that we're all the same.
Exactly, yeah. A lot of people that don't know any Aboriginal people think that we all run around in lap-laps and ride kangaroos. That's not the case.
Do you have any other examples that you want to share?
I guess I could probably think of a few more, but having said what I have, we will get conflict anywhere we go, and everywhere we go there will be some type of conflict because we don't all believe in the same thing or we don't act in the same way. But it's not the conflict; it's how we deal with it that makes us a better person or who we are. I guess.
So, if non-Indigenous people are coming for the first time to work in Aboriginal communities or with Aboriginal people, what message would you give them?
Be patient, I guess, is one big thing, because if this is your first experience with Aboriginal people, you're probably going to see some of the best and some of the worst behaviours that you'll experience in remote areas. This being just the edge, the gateway to the more remote regions, but we have people from the remote areas living together in the same town, which creates conflict as well. So I guess be patient and be prepared. It's not what you think it's going to be.
So, do you think that there are good things that people can learn from Aboriginal people?
Yes, definitely. There's still many good people within the communities and even within those groups that are trying to give the group a good, strong identity and acknowledging other people, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people in the community, giving them their right as an identity. There is positive outcomes there if you approach it in the right way, I guess.
So, are there any other things? I mean, do you want to talk about anything about what it's been like for you? Because you've been very successful in running your own business. Do you want to talk about that, or maybe some of the challenges you had to?
Talk about some of the challenges I've had through my growth. I've been back and forth to Dubbo since I was about 7 or 8 years old, spending time here as a young fella in school holidays only, coming back visiting families and spending time here. But as I grew into adulthood and moved into my careers, I've moved around a lot right throughout Australia. But when I come home, I always go back to a little area that everyone's identifies to very strongly. And through my growth, I've seen how it's changed out there, our little bit area of Tubbo-ga, but also in the community. I remember as a child beginning school and having 10 cents to go to the shop was a pretty big day for us, and you could be in any of the shops in Dubbo, and if a white person walked in after you, you'd have to wait till they were getting served. They would be served before you, and quite often that happened, and that was discrimination. And at the time I didn't know. I just thought it was just normal that white people had more of a right to be in white people's shops than black people, but we didn't have our own shops.
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot has changed, hasn't it?
Yes, I can walk into a shop anywhere today and be served, first, or in my order, in my lineup, my right order.
Do you think that there is still discrimination? Do you see it?
Yeah, I still witness it, and I know it's still there, but because of I guess the political correctness and that people don't put us down in the street anymore, and they're not allowed to call us certain names, and they have to treat us proper. and I know that it's still there. It's not expressed openly anymore. But having said that, a lot has changed, and the general, consensus of people now is that we are all equal in any situation, in any given situation, in schools, in hospitals, in shops, and just day-to-day stuff. Where you can see that we're being acknowledged more and more by even some of the older people that have been here for years. Some of them attitudes changed because they didn't know us, they didn't completely understand where we were coming from and what we were about. They tended to discriminate against us through their own ignorance.
So why do you think that change is coming about? Is it just simply because politics say you can't do it anymore, or do you think there's...
Well, yes, I do think that it's a big rule, and we can actually take people to court for calling us names, and that applies to everyone. I think it had more to do with the school structure. A lot of... my father only went to school. He didn't have any formal high school education. He only went to primary school. Whereas I got the opportunity to come to a school in town with other black kids and other white kids, and I got to make friends with white kids and other black kids. So that broke the segregation down in the public schools, made it much easier to be a part of the community rather than being isolated to the mission, and that was your group. You could have friends outside the mission, in town, white people and black people.
So you're seeing significant changes in your life?
Yes, quite a bit, quite a lot of significant change in the social structure, I guess, in the way that we've been discriminated against. A lot of people seem to be more educated or just more compassionate to who we are and where we're from, type thing.
So do you see that as there's positive changes in the wider community?
Yes, I definitely do see it as positive change. Any breakdowns of barriers or any walls or anything that stops the social interaction between the different groups of people is got to be a positive change. But for a lot of Aboriginal people, it's as long as we keep our identity, as we change and adapt to the system, as long as we keep our identity, it keeps people strong, I guess.
So at the crux of that, what you're saying is it's really important that we don't lose who we are.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add or say to people?
Not really, yeah.
No?
But just, welcome.
Thank you.
Come and welcome.